Hey, my name is Tina Lopez, and I'd love to be considered for this contract to hire role for the brand and content associate position. So, when I took a look at this, I kind of wanted to break this down in terms of what the role looks like and also the ways that we can go about in terms of maybe building a system to execute a lot of the work as part of this job position. So, when I saw this, I see that we're looking at platforms for LinkedIn and X. Those are really great because these are text-based platforms and the content, yes, they can accept different media types, but text, in my opinion, tends to do really well on it. But when I looked at like the deeper, details of what this role encompasses, I think there is an element of, can we identify the trends that are on these platforms? Could we figure out what the intake process looks like in terms of maybe leveraging founder content and taking the voice and then, amplifying it across every platform. So then we can actually create content, whether it's text, posts, short videos, anything like that, but really amplifying the founder's voice throughout all of this. And then, of course, having metrics to make sure that we are kind of improving over time with metrics that actually matter. And so I kind of wanted to take a stab and think about this from a perspective of like what agents or systems should we install for this. Now, when I think about trends, I think in order for you to have trends and understand what's, working well, there are two ways you can go about it. Either you can be chronically online or we can use APIs that pull trends directly from social media. And so we can find real-time trends across LinkedIn, across X, across TikTok, and pull those platforms to identify, what are the formats they're performing really well? What are the topics in terms of what is your audience talking about? And then finally, like, what are the hooks that actually work well for the content that we want to create? And so the whole goal of this trends kind of content or this trends agent is to stay informed of what's going on in social media without having you be chronically online, right? And so ultimately, once we have the trends, we can go ahead and transition and create an intake or a context agent, right? So much of, what makes founder-led content or just content in general really good is having context of what the founder is doing. What is the built-in public? What does that content look like, right? And so I think as a founder, like there are so many moving pieces that like trying to record all those content pieces can be quite difficult. And so this is where we can create maybe automations that automatically pull in the context that is already within your workstation, right? Could we leverage a screen monitoring tool as an example to pull in the context of what you're working on? Of course, we have a recommended tool that has all the data privacy in place for that. But can we pull that as a data source? Can we pull your AI note taker from maybe the sales calls or customer calls, pull that in so that we can create a set of a context so that when we are creating content, the content is grounded in the context of what's actually happening in the founder's life, right? And so we end up creating like a context database ultimately, where we can basically use a set of agents of if we wanted to create carousels or create, hook overlay videos or B-roll videos, right? It's going to be able to create better content because of what we did initially with creating this context database for your content specifically. So that's just one of the things that I think we can build together. And then when we look into this, it's kind of like, again, going back to the metrics piece of like, we're creating all this content, whether it's founder-led content and turning it into carousels, hooks, and B-roll, and then distributing it across every single platform. That is important. But then ultimately, it would be good to have like either a weekly or monthly review to see how that content's performing. And so we can create a metrics agent where we can review all of, the prior week's content or the prior month's content and really like determine what is actually performing really well, log that into a database so that when we create content in the future, we can actually see which content piece actually performed really well, what platform did really well, what trend actually did really well, so that we create kind of like this self-learning content machine, if you will, at the end of the day. Now, I'm a Zapier solutions partner. I love building in Claude Code, Codex, and building all the agents to execute content, especially founder-led content at scale. I'd love to be considered for this mission, and I'd love to have a conversation. So hopefully this kind of shares a little bit of the way that I think and the way that we could work together. I would love to hear from you soon. So with that being said, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Bye.